Thank you, my lord, for giving us the time to have a bit of a break. We have is it Q1 or Q7? Q1, exhibit Q1, my lord. It will be attached, I understand, to Mr. Olifio's statement.
Yeah.
Yes. Before the break, Mr. Kanyangela, we were dealing with the email of 14 November 2020. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We can now move to the next email that we have. That will be the email of 19 November 2021. 19 January 2021. That was sent at 07:59 p.m. You see that?
That's correct, I see it.
At the top of that email is from a person called Benito Pinal. And it was sent to Mr. Olivier and copied to Luis Fernandez and Mr. Kanyangela as well as Mr. Klute. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Those were those gentlemen that you said they are, or they were your subordinates.
That's correct.
So, Mr. Fernandez was also a subordinate?
No, those gentlemen, meaning Mr. Olivier and Mr. Klute.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, my lord. Mr. Klute and Mr. Olivier were your subordinates in the ACC.
That's correct.
And Mr. Fernandez is a gentleman from whom information was being sought by your subordinates.
That's correct.
There is, in the middle of that document, an email from Mr. Olivier. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The middle of that email is in a language that is not the official language of the court, but it has something like 18, whatever that is, 2021 at 11:28 hours. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It was also sent, if we look at CC, Luis Fernandez, yourself, and Mr. Klute. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is it fair that this email was sent in response to and after receipt of the email of 14 November 2020?
That's correct.
Where an explanation had been given to you, to the ACC by Mr. Fernandez?
That's correct.
In that email, could you read paragraph 1 into the record of that email?
Paragraph 1.
Just read what you can see, because perhaps in some instances the filing has interfered with one word or so.
The paragraph 1, you mean the first sentence or is the second?
No, the paragraph. We are busy.
Okay, you are busy with investigations regarding the so-called fishing quotas meant for governmental objectives. Wherein was found that your business had also received such quotas from Fishco.
Can you stop there? Wouldn't that be sufficient to this information, to these witnesses, to inform him that you were busy with investigations of governmental objectives?
That's correct.
In fact, this witness, you had already told him that you were busy investigating this case of governmental objectives. Is that correct? Before, not yourself maybe, but your colleagues had already told him, because he had already responded and sent you the list of documents and explanation. Is that correct?
I will not say that he was aware that, or it was indicated to him that we were investigating the government objectives, because the documents that we requested them based on the payment that was made by Loki to these companies.
Yes. You then told him that certain individuals, I mean, just look at that statement. certain individuals or certain persons in influential positions used their positions and office for personal gain, either for themselves or another. Is that correct? That is what is in this?
That's correct.
And you told this person that it was in the context of that statement that you were investigating low-key. Would that be correct to reach that conclusion?
That is what he was told?
Yes. That fishing quotas was that's what it reads. Anyway, I will not try to change the context. It says fishing quotas was given to Fishco as a designated entity, and in order to monetize such quotas, it was sold via set catching agreements to entities such as low-key investment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then you told him that the report that he had presented, or your subordinates, was not accepted or acceptable to the ACC. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You said, I want to make it clear that your report is not accepted, that your business did not have the capacity to provide bogus invoices of one account investment, CC, and others for services never rendered.
Yes, that is what is indicated.
So you, and these are your subordinates, you were copied on this email, so you were aware of this email. I put it to you that you were intimidating this witness to give a version.
I was copied to this email.
Let me finish.
Yes.
It's a pity because Mr. Olivier is not here, Mr. Kajengel.
Yes.
And I understand truly what your dilemma is. But I also have a job that I have to do because this was part of your team that you were supervising.
Yes.
So I'm putting this, and if you disown this, that's fine, you can do so, but I'm not doing it because I'm saying you are responsible for the actions of Mr. Olivier. But I'm saying, as a supervisor of Mr. Olivier, who was copied in this email, you probably had oversight in what was communicated by him. And I'm trying, within that context, to understand what was the thinking and put you the dilemma that I have. You understand?
I understand.
Yes. So, I'm putting it to you that the ACC officials, judging by this statement, were out to intimidate Mr. Fernandez to give a version that is acceptable to them, not the version that Mr. Fernandez had provided.
I cannot agree to that.
He had already provided a detailed response, Exhibit DD that we went through with you earlier today, this morning. But you did not like that version. You wanted him to reach a version that was favorable to the pursuit of the objective that you saw. Is that correct?
That report that he provided a report with insufficient information, and that is what resulted for me to send him another email. We never intimidate him. To say that the report that is submitted is not accepted, I don't think that is an intimidation.
Because here is the problem that I have, and it appears in the third paragraph. You did not work for low-key, is that correct? Or your officials did not work for low-key?
That's correct.
I fail to understand why, if a company says, I did not have capacity during my establishment to undertake certain business interests and functions, you would come and say, I don't like what you are telling me that, that your business did not have the capacity. Why would that be disputed? That his business did not have the capacity?
Why it is...
Did you go through the employment list to see how many people they had employed?
I did not.
So that's why I'm saying, the gist of this email, when I look at it, it seems to drive towards a certain conclusion, to intimidate him, to change his version, because you did not like his version that he had provided.
I will not agree to what you're saying.
You also went ahead and then made allegations that they provided bogus invoices of one account.
Yes, they were bogus.
Where did this come from? Because he had provided his response. Did you itemize and tell him why you were saying that they are bogus?
We said they are bogus.
No, I'm asking, did you itemize enlist why you were saying that the invoices were bogus?
No, it was not.
Let me go to the next one. And this is scary because I see a pattern, and we have discussed this, and I'll come to another one. You then went ahead and said Wanakadu Investment neither had any capacity to give any services according to your invoices for vessel repair, vessel management, and food for crew. You then are very dismissive of an individual that is running that company. You are saying he is the owner of Wanakadu Investment is just a city of Windhoek police officer with no capacity to perform such work. He is failing to come and provide any kind of proof of any services. Is that being a police officer? Does that mean you are unable to provide consultancy services if you engage the right people that have those skills?
If he could provide such services.
My Lord.
Remember what the purpose of cross-examination is. The purpose of cross-examination is to test the veracity of testimonies that has been given by a specific individual. And Mr.
Engelbrecht.
The witness, the owner of Wanakadu, not the owner, the sole member.
Yes, ma'am.
The sole member of Wanakadu was in that box. He stood there. He was questioned about the staff. He said he was alone. He was questioned about his qualifications. He testified to them. Now, for you to come and suggest to this witness that the sole member of Wanakadu had other capacities and other abilities cannot be correct. That will be amounting to misleading this witness, and that I will not allow.
All right. Yes. Not maybe before you make a ruling, let me see and put forward the context within which I'm looking at this email.
No, what I'm saying is it's the ability and the capacity of the sole member of Wanakadu.
Yes.
That was canvassed at large.
All right.
When he was here.
That is correct, my Lord.
That was canvassed.
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying, the suggestion that this witness does not know the capacity of the owner, the sole member of Wanakadu, is misleading to him.
All right. My Lord, I look at this email as like a picture, a photo, a snapshot of the facts as at that particular time. Okay. I'm not embellishing it with what has since transpired in this court, because that is something else. I'm looking at the email, the response at the time when it was given. Yeah. And what was said, and therefore I believe that question could be fair in the context of the timing of these particular documents.
No, you see, what I'm saying is...
Yes, my Lord.
The question of the capacity of the sole member was canvassed. And I'm sure why it was canvassed in court and in evidence is because of the factual information that was available.
All right, my Lord.
You see, all that I'm saying is, just remember the purpose of cross-examination. Yeah. Cross a witness to the testimony that was given in court. Cross him on that evidence.
All right.
Yeah.
As it pleases you, my Lord. Mr. Kanyangela, if we go to the last sentence, of course, some portion of it seems to be either through photocopying. It seems to be broken. The last line. You see, the paragraph that starts, we want you to provide us with the correct version. The first page, Mr. Kanyangel.
Yes, I can see it.
Can you read that into the record?
I don't know as to how far I will read it, because on this document it is cut.
All right. My Lord, then I will not proceed with this document because it was not...
Mr. Lutubeti, is a document that's clearer and that has...
We can make it available later on for the court.
Do you have it there?
Not the one that we have, Your Lordship. We just received this from our colleagues. Okay. These are part of
because
the
even the one on the court file, the last sentence is cut off.
Yes, I think that was also provided by them. We'll get a clearer one.
No, this one was provided by you.
No, not the emails. Mr. Engelbrecht, I think, submitted the...
No, this is exhibit Q1.
Yes.
Oh, it's Mr. Engelbrecht who submitted it.
Yes, Your Lordship.
That cannot be received from the state during the disclosure.
But it's fine, Your Lordship. We'll provide a clearer copy for the court.
Well, that is fine. I can always refer to it later on once we have the clearer copy. I would like to take you now to the agreements between Seaflower Whitefish Corporation and Novanam. Is part of the state disclosure, and that will be on page 99.
99 of?
99, it's exhibit Z20.
Yes, you may proceed. I have
All
it.
right. Mr. Kanyangela, are you looking at that document?
Yes, I'm looking at it.
Would you agree with me that this is an agreement between Seaflower Whitefish Corporation and Novanam?
Yes, correct.
All right. And it related to utilization of 1,200 metric tons of hake, wet quota for the 2014-2015 fishing season.
Yes, correct.
Like the previous ones that we dealt with in the morning, it has a clause relating to the right to utilize quota under paragraph 2.
Yes, correct.
And it's very clear as to what quota was to be provided by Fisco to this other entity, Novanam. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And also in terms of the consideration or the price that had to be paid in paragraph 3, it was clear as well as to what had to be paid for.
Yes, correct.
That would be 2,600 Namibian dollars per metric ton of hake wet quota as usage fee, excluding VAT.
That's correct.
Quota fees and levies and payable upon presentation of a tax invoice. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It also had a clause relating to government levies and inspectorate levies, etc.
That's correct.
And it was clear as well that what should happen should Novanam fail to cash the full metric ton of hake wet quota and hake freezer quota authorized in terms of this agreement under paragraph 5.2.
That's correct.
What did it say Novanam would do in terms of that clause? Novanam would be responsible to effect payment of the full levy to Seaflower. Is that correct? The first sentence.
That's correct.
And should the Ministry of Fisheries impose levies in excess of $300 per metric ton, those also will be payable by Novanam. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It also talked about compliance with the law.
That's correct.
Under paragraph 5.
That's correct.
Can you read what it actually said under 5.1?
5.1, it reads, Novanam undertakes to comply with all laws and regulations relating to fishing and with all the terms and conditions applicable to the quotas when fishing Seaflower's quota in terms of this agreement.
So would it be fair to conclude that the parties specifically agreed that Novanam had to comply with the law in the enforcement of this agreement?
That's correct.
And what did Novanam indemnify Seaflower against in terms of that clause? If you read the second sentence.
It said Novanam hereby indemnifies Seaflower against all loss, claim, expenses, penalties, fines, and the like which Seaflower may suffer, or which may be imposed against Novanam, as the case may be, as a result of any breach by Novanam of any of the provisions of this agreement.
It also dealt with if you look at the following clause, the following page 102, what would happen in the event of a breach of the agreement? The material clauses of this agreement, is that correct?
Yes.
And that each party shall be entitled without prejudice to any rights which it may have at common law to cancel the agreement on written notice. Is that correct?
That's correct.
To the best of your knowledge, was this agreement ever cancelled by Novanam during your investigation?
No, it was not cancelled.
Was it subsequently cancelled at any time, even to date?
Not what I'm aware of.
This agreement also is quite clear in terms of being the sole agreement, if regard is held to paragraph 10. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What does it say, paragraph 10?
Paragraph 10 is saying this agreement contains all the terms and conditions of the agreement between the parties and no representations, warranties, undertakings, or promises of whatsoever nature which might have been given by one party who are not to the other.
Would it be correct that this would be one of those agreements that were negotiated and concluded with Mr. Kamano?
That's correct.
If we can go to the page 104, Seaflower Whitefish Corporation versus Novanam. Are you looking at that?
Yes, I'm there.
My lord, it does not appear to me that this agreement is also one of the exhibits.
Yeah. According to me, it's not an exhibit.
It's not an exhibit?
Yeah.
The one that we are looking at page 104?
The one at the EK95.
Yeah, EK95, my lord.
Yeah.
My lord, I'm advised that it's exhibit TT. DD. But I can always clarify that I was
Which
not...
one?
I was not here for a portion of the proceedings, so...
Which one is DD?
It becomes DD because Q will have been.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to be an exhibit now. Sorry, my lord. We misunderstood each other here.
Oh, okay.
Yes, he's already talking about what exhibit we should put it.
Oh,
so I thought he was saying that it's already
No, because
an exhibit.
according to my record, it was
No,
not,
it's not- it's
it
not.
was not admitted into evidence as an exhibit.
Yes, it pleases you, my lord. This is the agreement as well between Seaflower, Whitefish Corporation and Novanam. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In summary, it would be fair to say it has the similar, largely similar clauses as well for the right to utilize the quota, consideration to be paid, that was 4,000 here instead of the 2,600. And clauses relating to government levies, compliance with the law, breach of the clause or breach of the agreement, as well as the sole agreement under clause 10.
That's correct.
Largely, it seems to be almost a template of the previous one.
That's
There may
correct,
be
yes.
one or two things that are different, but largely, generally, when one looks at it.
That's
And
correct.
this one was concluded not by Mr. Kamano, but it was concluded by a different individual when regard is here to page 108. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I cannot make sense of that name there, but it seems strangely similar to the head or the MD or CEO of the Novanam Group.
That's correct.
But I may be incorrect here, but it looks the same. So it would be fair to also reach a conclusion that...
Mr. Patela, is yours signed?
I beg your pardon?
Is yours signed?
Yes, it's signed at the bottom, 108.
Or only by one party?
Yes, it's signed by... On page 108, there's a signature there that appears on that page.
On behalf of Seaflower, it's not signed?
On behalf of Seaflower, it's not signed, my lord.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. But it has been signed by Mr...
Todd Bisili, so.
I'm reluctant to, to spell out that name, but yes, there is a signature there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. During your investigations, did Novanam ever say that the agreement was never fully signed by the parties? If you can recall that at the top of your...
As to what is in the statement of Mr.
Todilas, all right. All right. Mr. Jose Ramon Kamano Canosa was working for Novanam, is that correct?
That's correct.
You had his statement as well, is that correct?
That's correct.
Perhaps we can just look at that statement of Mr. Kamano, my lord. It was earlier introduced as Exhibit Z23. You have a copy there.
Yes, I do have.
All right. Okay. It would appear that he provided this statement to you on, well, when I say to you, but to the ACC on 9 of December 2020.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. This statement was also commissioned by Mr. Olivier, who was your colleague at the ACC.
That's correct.
All right. Did you read this statement?
Yes, I read the statement.
What did you make of this statement? Generally, just briefly.
What I read from the statement, I read the explanation he gave on the agreements entered into and the payments made by Novanam.
Yes. You were satisfied with the quality of this statement?
Yes, I'm satisfied with it.
Has any of you in the past spoken to Mr. Jose Ramon Canosa Kamanu? Face-to-face engagement with him?
I know I attended the interview with him once, but with the engagement with Karel Klote and Olivier, I cannot say as to how many times did they communicate.
He seemed...
But when he came to give a statement,
yes,
we sit with him,
yes,
we interview him, then his statement was okay.
Did he display an ability to recall events like a normal person would when you were talking to him? A normal, reasonable person, not somebody of extraordinary ability, just an ordinary person.
I do not observe his inability.
All right. His statement, you remember what I said about his statement yesterday?
Yes.
I said the statement seems to be making a mockery of Namibia's finest anti-corruption institution. You remember I said that yesterday?
Yeah, you said it.
Yes. And in fact, I alerted you that today we will deal with this statement.
Yes.
You looked at this statement again yesterday.
Yes.
And you are still satisfied with it.
Yes.
I submit, or I put it to you that looking at this statement, it's unsatisfactory. And a person of your investigative, position should not be satisfied with a statement like this to be used in a court of law.
I don't know why you say it's unsatisfactory. Maybe you can explain.
All right. Let's go through the statement. He deposes that he is the general manager, Fleet of Novanam, with the business address at number 15 Benamatila Street, Walvis Bay. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And he also says he has the capacity to depose to this affidavit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
He says in paragraph 2 that in 2020, October 2020, the ACC approached him, first approached Novadam, not him, first approached Novadam for information towards an ongoing investigation into an alleged corrupt practice as per case files, those long case files there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
He was then informed that the summons was subsequently served on Novanam Managing Director, Mr. Edwin Kamatoto. Is that correct?
That's correct.
He was further informed that Mr. Kamatoto had deposed to 2 affidavits on behalf of Novanam before the ACC.
Yes, that's correct.
He then goes on in paragraph 5 to say Mr. Kamatoto submitted his affidavits. After Mr. Kamatoto submitted his affidavits, the ACC required more information. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What was the negotiation, the more information required about? There were 2 things that were required in particular when we look at the second line of that affidavit. You see that?
Yes, I see.
It was about negotiation and conclusion of the above-mentioned quota utilization agreements. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, importantly, the negotiations as well as the quota utilization. Those were your primary goals. Is that correct?
Negotiation and conclusion of the agreements, yes.
Did he give you anything in this statement regarding negotiations? Because you have read the statement, you read it before, you also say you still find it acceptable. You don't have to answer that question, we can move on. We'll draw that conclusion at the end. Yes, and the payments. He also had to deal with the payments of invoices to third-party entities on the instructions of Fishco, previous CEO, Mr. Mike Ngepunya. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The ACC required this information from members of Novanam management who had first-hand knowledge of the quota agreements and payment to third parties. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Would these first-hand knowledge officials include him, Mr. Kamano? When it says from members of Novanam's management who had first-hand knowledge of the quota agreements.
I don't know to which member he's referring to.
Yes, but is it reasonable to assume that he
But
is one
there
of
were
those people?
some who were approached before
Yes.
he gave the statement.
All right. He says this led to the ACC saving, after you wanted this, further clarification from members from Novanam's management who had first-hand knowledge. Paragraph 6 there, this led to him or the ACC serving a summons addressed to him on Novanam's premises on 1 December 2020. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the copy, he has attached them to his statement, as he says.
Yes.
Then he tells you of the purpose of this affidavit. Do you see that again?
I see.
You requested him to do certain things. He says this is the purpose of this affidavit. To provide for information and documentation required in terms of the summons, that is, information pertaining to the negotiation and conclusion of the quota utilization agreements between Novanam and Fishco. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the payment of invoices to third-party entities on the instructions of Mr. Mike Ngepunya.
That's correct.
He then goes to paragraph 9. My learned friend dealt with a similar paragraph when he was cross-examining you, Mr. Soni, that all the information disclosed, he says all the information disclosed in this affidavit and the documentation annexed here too is provided on the fair understanding that Novanam and myself provide such information in terms of Section 52 of the Act, and that this affidavit may not be used against Novanam, any of his subsidiaries and any of the employees, including himself, in any action or proceedings of a disciplinary, civil or criminal nature. Is that correct?
That's correct.
He then tells you his professional background.
That's correct.
We are aware, and you were asked questions whether you have the power to make such guarantees in terms of Section 52. And you gave your answer when my learned friend was cross-examining you. You remember?
Yes, it's a provision of the Act, of the Anti-Corruption Act.
All right. He says he arrived in Namibia from Spain in 1995 to take up employment as manager operations for a company that was called Coastal Marine Industries, who had fishing operations at Luderitz. Is that correct?
That's correct.
This company was taken over by Pesca Nova. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The Spanish mother entity of Novanam.
That's correct.
Then he says how he moved from Luderitz and then to Walvis Bay, and what he was responsible to do was to manage this wet fleet operating from Luderitz.
That's correct.
He then deals with the importance or the important matter of what you had requested from him. Paragraph C.
That's correct.
You see that?
Yes.
He tells you about how he came to know Sea Flower since he worked from Luderitz.
Yes.
And when I speak of Sea Flower in this statement, he refers to fishing companies partially owned by the state.
That's correct.
And when making this statement, he was informed that Fishco is the state entity, having subsidiaries including Sea Flower Wet Fish Corporation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
This is where my problems start. Paragraph 15. Mr. Mike Ngepunya became the person in charge of Sea Flower during 2014. That's why I don't have a problem. He then says, I cannot recall the exact year that I first met Mr. Ngepunya, but I believe it was in 2014 and 2015. I want you to write, have a pen, and a small note where you can tally each time this man says that he cannot recall something of importance. You will be surprised. Can we give him the paper to tally so that the two of us can do a calculation? If we can give it to if we can give it to Mr. Kayengela.
No, I not on the statement. It's fine.
My Lord.
We see some notes on this, so on the
Is this a normal trial in criminal trials?
My learned friends are very vigilant. I say
This is normal in criminal trials.
Unfortunately, I don't participate in that space, my Lord. So,
All right.
But it seems to be very normal when you look at them.
All right.
It is, Your Lordship. We noticed some notes, so some of the papers have been excluded.
Okay.
It's not part of the 500,000 pages that are still missing.
All right.
He says, the first time I met Mr. Ngepunya was at his office, which was situated in Seaflower White Factory in Luderitz. The purpose of the visit was to introduce himself and to inform him of Novanam's interest in purchasing hay quota from Seaflower if they had left. You see that?
Yes, I see.
Yes. Mr. Ngepunya has already testified, giving a different version, that he met this gentleman in 2009, not in 2014 and 2015 as he alleges here. And he says he first met him a long time ago.
If we can just go back to paragraph 15, I think here is two issues here.
Yes.
Here is the issue of knowing Mr. Mike Ngepunya become a CEO of Fishrot.
All right.
And the second thing, he said he cannot recall the first time he met him. These are two different issues.
All right. But there is something that he cannot recall. You realize?
Yes.
Believe me, we will go, it's easy. We will go through it, you and I, and then we will reach a conclusion at the end.
So did I hear you correct, Mr. Patela, that you are saying Mr. Ngepunya testified in this court?
Yes.
That he met Mr. Kamano the first time 2009.
Yes, I believe it was 2000. That's what he testified, my Lord.
No.
Oh, 2011, my Lord. No.
Yes.
Yeah, 2011. Yes.
Maybe 2009. The testimony I had is that 2009 he was in Khobabe.
Oh, yes, yeah, my Lord.
Yeah.
No, 2011, my Lord.
Yeah.
2011. So they first met in 2011 with Mr. Ngepunya. Is that correct? Well, you wouldn't know because you were not there, but this was disputed by my client. If we go to paragraph 18, he says he knew some of the persons who were given quota and they approached him to help them cash their quota. Is that correct?
That's correct.
He then said Novanam would then negotiate and agree with them to use their quota with the intent to conclude the joint ventures.
That's correct.
I don't have much of a gravamen with paragraph 19. Let's go to paragraph 20. You see that?
I see.
He says, since about 2014, if I can recall correctly, this is my second problem. I became involved in helping Novanam to source quota from the newcomers, but also from Seaflower. He seems to be uncertain. Is that correct?
I cannot say it's correct because that is not my statement.
Yes, but looking at it, you can read it like every reasonable person.
No,
he seems to be unsure. He says, if I recall correctly.
I will not comment on that one.
All right. Paragraph 20. This is the second instance where he doesn't seem to have a proper recollection of events. Now, let's go to paragraph 22. He says, over time, Novanam negotiated and agreed with Seaflower to buy some of his quota. He would normally be the person in Novanam who approached Seaflower and negotiated on the conditions and price of the quota. Is that correct?
That's correct.
These agreements were recorded in writing and signed. That is correct.
That's correct.
We have seen some of those agreements.
That's correct.
He then tells us what would happen before the agreements were signed. He says he would inform the Novanam management before the CEO, Mr. Miguel,
Not before, being.
Being the CEO, Mr. Miguel Tordesillas, and the financial manager, Mr. Jose Joaquim Rodriguez, of the opportunity to buy quota at the given price, and if they agreed, I will proceed to confirm the agreement with Sea Flower. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, meaning the terms and conditions of these agreements were clearly written down.
That's correct.
One would also expect that there would not be doubt as to the ambit or the extent of the agreements and what the parties' relationship were when these agreements were concluded.
That's correct.
All right. He also says that he did not have the authority to sign these agreements and only signed the quota agreements if authorized and instructed by Novanam management to do so.
That's correct.
25, he specifically says in his dealings with Sea Flower by buying their quota, he always negotiated with the CEO, Mr. Ngepunya.
That's correct.
26, the following quota agreements are part of Novanam documents that came to my attention and were concluded with Sea Flower as described during the period 2014 to 2019. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, can you read that sentence and tell me whether a person of that position?
He said, I cannot recall the particular circumstances surrounding the negotiations or the signing of each specific agreement.
So this is the third time that this man is not able to recall anything or something.
But I cannot explain it.
Yes, but we are calculating. I'm just asking you, I'm not asking you to get into his mind. I say, looking at it, this is the third time that he cannot recall.
Yes, is what he's saying?
Yes. The particular circumstance surrounding a specific aspect for which he was in charge of. Because he has said so. He said he was the one that was negotiating the agreements. And that's the information that you sought from him, that he must provide you information surrounding the negotiations. He tells you, I cannot recall the negotiations. What did you make of that when you were reading this statement?
I did not make out that he's have no any ability
to recall. Do you have quality assurance or quality control in your office? When you receive a statement, you can go through it and say, does it meet these basic requirements? Or you just accept whatever is written by Mr. Kamanu?
I will just accept it as it is.
All right. My Lord, it's 1300 hours. I don't know whether I should still proceed. I feel good. I'm ready to go for another hour. If His Lordship wishes for us to do so, but Mr. Marondez and my other colleagues are shaking their heads in disbelief. Shall we go for lunch, my Lord, and come back a bit more?
I'm inviting everybody for lunch.
Yes, my Lord, I invite everybody as long as I'm not footing the bill. Yes. We can continue the witness, my Lord, when I come back.
Yes, 2:15. Mr. Kanyangela?
Yes, my Lord.
You are still under oath, and again the normal admonition, you are not allowed to speak to anybody about the matter.
Yes, my Lord.
Court to rise.